Good day everyone! Today, we will going to tackle about the story of the dress that sang by the West African folk tale. But before we proceed to the story, let us answer this question related to the story for us to be able to know what is the story all about and for us to understand the story. So the questions are, what is a trickster tale? Second, what are the values of trickster? And then third, do they teach children a lesson about life? So trickster tales are short, imaginative narratives that usually use anthropomorphic animal characters to convey folk wisdom and to help us understand human nature and develop proper human behavior. The following trickster tale tells of Anansi, a prominent figure of Ashanti people of West Africa. Anansi the trickster is one of the most important characters of West African and Caribbean folklore. And yes, they teach children a lesson about life. And now, let us find out who are the characters of the story and the settings.
Here are the characters of the story. Anansi, who is a rich man and had a plenty of children to help him with his farming. Chameleon, a poor man who alone had to till his farm. And a chief, who is the head of that town. Setting. The setting of the story is a small town in ancient Egypt where we can see the farm and village. The type of conflict is man versus man, Anansi versus chameleon.
And please take note the vocabulary word used in this story for us to be able to understand clearly the story.
Vocabulary word: vex, to annoy, barely, ended or truly, granary, storehouse, trickster, a dishonest person or a cheater, cleverness, mental skill or quickness, outwit, to get better through cleverness, cloak, a loose outer garments, till, to work by plowing or rising crops on.
The Krachi relates how Anansi and the chameleon used to live in the same town. Anansi was a rich man and had plenty of children to help him with his farming. But the chameleon was only a poor man and alone had to till his farm. Now, it chanced that one year the rain fell only on the chameleon's farm, and on Anansi's there was a complete drought. Thus, the spider's farm did not come up at all, and the chameleon's was already well up, and a good harvest was promised. This annoyed Anansi, and one day he called on the chameleon and asked him if he would sell him his farm. But the chameleon said he would not, as if he did, he would not be able to get any food during the dry season. Then, Anansi was even angrier than before and swore he would have revenge on the chameleon. Now, it happens that the chameleons do not make any roads as others do. They like to walk over the grass and bushes. Thus, there was no path leading from the chameleon's house to his farm. So that night, Anansi called all his children together and told them to clean and make a good path from his compound to the chameleon's farm. At first, they begged their father not to do this, but as he insisted, they obeyed him, and in the morning there was finished a clean road and well-used one leading from Anansi's house to the farm. Anansi at once went to the farm and began to pull up some cassava. Presently, the chameleon came along and saw Anansi taking his cassava and called out,
"Hi, Anansi. What are you doing in my farm?" Go away and do not vex me. Can you not see that I am busy working in my farm?
Your farm? Why? It is my farm and everyone knows.
Do not be silly. Go away, or I shall get angry and kill you.
So the chameleon went away and laid a complaint before the chief. Anansi was sent for, and when both had told him how the farm was theirs, the chief asked for proofs.
That is easy. I have a path from my house straight to the farm, which Chameleon is falsely claiming. He has no path.
The chief saw that if Anansi was speaking true, then verily the farm must be his. So he sent his messenger to see, and the man came back and said that it was so. Then the chameleon was asked what he had to say, and he said that he did not know anything about the path, that he always used to go there over the bushes and grass. This made the chief laugh, and he at once gave the farm to Anansi, who took all his children with him and gathered the crops. The chameleon didn't know what to do. He was very poor and had but little food left to keep him alive. So he went to his house and shut the door and refused to see anyone. For many days he remained thus, thinking over his wrongs and wondering how to get revenge. Then he began to dig a hole. He dug and dug and dug and made an immense well. It went far down. No man had ever seen such a well. When the chameleon thought he had made it large enough, he made some mud and began to roof the well so that soon only a very small hole was left. Then the chameleon went out to see Anansi. He came to the latter's house and greeted him.
Master, I am only a poor man. May I go to your farm and glean what you have left there?
Anansi was pleased at that chameleon's humility and told him he could. But there was a little in the farm to gather. Then the chameleon, who had deceived the spider into thinking that he was probably humbled, again sat alone in his house. This time he amused himself in catching hundreds and hundreds of that great fly which makes so big and buzzing noise. These he tied to some dried yam vines which he had brought back from his farm. One day the chief sent messengers to all the land to call his people together, and from every place people came into the town. Then the chameleon arose and covered himself with the dried yarn vines and walked slowly like a proud and rich man to the chief's compound. And as he went, he kept swinging his strange costume, and the flies being shaking buzzes more and more. Everyone admired it, and the chief himself asked to buy it. But the chameleon refused and went home. Now Anansi was late for the meeting, and when he did arrive, everyone was talking about his wonderful costume. The chief told Anansi that the chameleon had refused to sell it, and Anansi said that that was nothing, and that he would buy it and would bring it to the chief. He went and called on the chameleon.
Friend, I hear you have the most wonderful cloak, which whenever you walk sings to you. Is this so?
The chameleon answered that it was so, and then Anansi asked him if he would sell it. The chameleon at first refused, but after a time did agree to sell it if Anansi would give him some food. Anansi asked him how much he would want, and the chameleon said that he did not require a great deal, merely enough to fill the hole which Anansi himself could see. Then Anansi laughed and said that he would willingly do that, and to show that he bore him no grudge, he would give him twice as much. Then Anansi went to his own house and called his children and told them to come with him, and each to carry a little food. They went to the chameleon's house and began to fill the hole with the food they had bought. But that hole could not be filled. All the family of Anansi worked, and for many days they carried the corn and other food to fill the hole, and always the chameleons reminded Anansi that he had promised twice the amount. Anansi didn't know what to do. He had finished all the food that he had been stored in his own bins and granaries, and he had sent out in all directions to buy food. But still the hole was not filled. He sold his sheep and his cows and everything that he had, for he knew that when he did get the cloak, the chief would repay him. But he could not fill the hole. Then, when the chameleon saw that Anansi was no longer a rich man, and that he had no food left for himself, he called him and said,
Friend, you have not paid me the agreed on price, but I'm not a hard man, and I will now forgive you the rest of the debt. Here's the cloak.
Saying this, he took out the cloak from its box and put it over the shoulder of Anansi. But the cloak had been a long time in the box, and the strings which held the flies were all rotted. This Anansi did not know, and when he went outside and began to swing the rope, the flies all buzzed. But suddenly there came a strong blast of wind and shook the cloak too much. All the flies were released and flew away and left Anansi dressed only in the dried vine stalks of the yams. Then all the town laughed, and Anansi grew so ashamed that he began to hide himself from that day, away from the sight of man, and did not walk in the streets.
The story is about a man named Chameleon who got his farm stolen from another man who jealous of him. This man, Anansi, was so clever in how he took his farm, but Chameleon was smarter in how he got it back. Anansi was very deceiving and did not care that he was stealing from a man that was already poor. Even though Anansi was stealing from Chameleon, he never stepped up his character, but he did get his revenge without using violence, but instead he outsmarted Anansi.
Let's move now to the excerpt or the short extract of the story. Now it happens that chameleons do not make roads as others do. They like to walk over the grass and the bushes. Thus, there was no path leading from the chameleon's house to his farm. So that night, Anansi called his children together and told them to clean and make a good path to the chameleon's farm. At first, they begged their father not to do this, but as he insisted, they obeyed him. And in the morning, there was a finished clean road and a well-used one leading from Anansi's house to the farm.
Why we use the excerpt? This is how Anansi made people believe that the farmland belonged to him. The chameleon had no way to prove that the land was his, because he never had a road to his land. Hem. That hem is you reap what you sow. The man who stole from Chameleon was tricked into giving Chameleon back the food that was rightfully his, plus more.
Literary elements. The story is told from a third-person point of view. The narrator is telling what Anansi is doing as well as the chameleon.
So now let us find out the purpose of the story. So what are the purpose of the story? So the purpose of the story is to inform everyone. The myth is explaining that stealing is not okay and that karma will always come back on you. Thank you for listening and have a great day.